My father looked me in the eye and handed the keys to his construction empire to my sister, who cannot read a blueprint to save her life. Then my mother leaned in and whispered the words that would burn down our relationship forever. "You are just a worker bee, Imani. Your sister is the queen." They thought I would bow my head and accept my place in the dirt. They forgot one thing. I own the license that keeps their gates open. Before I continue this story of how I turned my tool belt into a crown, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Please hit that subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to protect you. My name is Imani, and at 29 years old, I learned that blood is not thicker than money. The gravel crunching under the tires of my battered Ford F-150 was the only unpolished sound in the entire neighborhood. I pulled up to the wrought iron gates of my parents' estate in Buckhead, the engine of my work truck wheezing slightly as I killed the ignition. To my left and right were rows of gleaming Mercedes Range Rovers and Bentleys. It looked like a luxury car dealership had exploded onto the lawn. This was the annual Davis Family Summer Gala, the event of the season for Atlanta Black Elite, and I was late. Not fashionably late like my sister Bianca usually was, but sweating, exhausted, and covered in a fine layer of drywall dust late. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror and sighed. There was a smear of grease on my cheek, and my braids were pulled back in a messy bun that had started to unravel around hour 10 of my shift. I had planned to go home and change into the silk dress hanging in my back seat, but the call from the West Side job site had come in at noon. The scaffolding on the third floor had buckled. If I had not driven straight there and physically reinforced the bracing with the crew, the whole structure would have come down. I saved the company $50,000 in damages and a potential lawsuit today. I hoped that would be enough to excuse my appearance. As I stepped out of the truck, the heavy, humid air of Georgia hit me, mixing with the smell of expensive perfume and roasted lamb coming from the backyard. I wiped my hands on my jeans, creating new streaks of dirt on the denim, and walked toward the side gate. I could hear the smooth jazz quartet playing the clink of crystal glasses and the low hum of polite conversation. I took a deep breath. Today was the day. For 7 years, ever since I graduated with my master's in construction management, my father Isaiah had promised that when he turned 65, he would announce his successor. I had run every major site for 5 years. I had cut costs by 15%. I knew every code, every permit, and every crew member by name. I turned the corner into the garden, and the conversation nearest to me died instantly. It was Mrs. Johnson and her daughter, both wearing pastel fascinators. They looked me up and down like I was a stray dog that had wandered in from the alley. "Imani," Mrs. Johnson said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Did you get lost on the way to the service entrance?" Before I could answer, a hand gripped my arm hard enough to bruise. I turned to see my mother, Loretta. She was wearing a gold sequined gown that cost more than my first car, and her face was twisted in a mask of pure horror. "What are you doing?" she hissed, dragging me behind a large decorative fern. "Look at you! You are filthy!" "Mom." I tried to pull my arm away. The west side scaffolding collapsed. I had to fix it or we would have lost the permit. I came straight here. "I do not care if the sky was falling." She snapped her eyes, scanning the crowd to see if anyone was watching us. "This is a high-class event, Imani. We have investors here. We have the mayor here. And you walk in looking like one of the day laborers. You are embarrassing the family." "I saved the family $50,000 today," I said, my voice hardening. "Lower your voice," she commanded. "Look at your sister. Look at how she presents herself. That is what a Davis woman looks like." I looked across the lawn. Bianca was standing near the champagne tower wearing a white silk dress that shimmered in the late afternoon sun. She was laughing at something my sister husband Hunter was saying. She looked pristine, untouchable. She also had not stepped foot on a job site in 3 years, and the last time she did, she billed the company for a pair of Jimmy Choos she ruined in the mud. "Go to the kitchen and stay there until the guests leave," my mother said, smoothing her hair. "If you are going to dress like the help, you might as well act like them." She turned on her heel and walked away before I could respond. The sting of her words felt worse than the concrete burn on my elbows. I stood there for a moment, fighting the urge to get back in my truck and leave. But I stayed. I stayed because of Dad. He knew how hard I worked. He was the one who taught me how to pour foundation when I was 12. He would set this right. I skirted the edge of the party, grabbing a glass of water from a passing tray and ignoring the sneer of the waiter. I found a spot near the back, under the shade of a magnolia tree, just as the music died down. My father walked onto the small stage set up over the pool. He looked regal in his white tuxedo, holding a microphone like it was a scepter. "Thank you all for coming," his voice boomed, rich and charismatic. Everyone turned. The silence was respectful, heavy with anticipation. "We have built Davis Custom Homes from a single truck and a dream into the premier Black-owned construction firm in Georgia," he began. I saw heads nodding. I felt a swell of pride. I was part of that. I was the engine behind that truck. But a company must evolve. My father continued. "We must look to the future. We need fresh vision. We need leadership that matches the elegance and prestige of our clientele." My heart started to hammer against my ribs. This was it. He was talking about the rebranding strategy I had pitched last month. "I am stepping down as CEO effective immediately," he announced. I took a half step forward, ready to walk up the stairs. "And I am proud to announce that the new face of Davis Custom Homes, the person who will lead us into a new era of sophistication, is my daughter, Bianca Davis." The world stopped. The applause that erupted sounded like it was coming from underwater. I froze, my foot hovering in the air. I watched Bianca squeal, putting a hand to her chest in mock surprise before gliding up the stairs. She hugged Dad, flashing her perfect veneers at the crowd. "And helping her steer the ship," my father added, shouting over the applause, "will be a man who brings strategic brilliance to our family. My son-in-law Hunter will be taking over as Chief Operating Officer." Hunter bounded up the stage, high-fiving my father. Hunter, a man who thought a load-bearing wall was just a suggestion. A man I had to stop from buying illegal copper piping last month. He was going to be COO. I stood alone under the magnolia tree, the drywall dust on my skin suddenly feeling like sandpaper. They did not just pass me over, they erased me. Dad took the mic back one last time. "And let us not forget Imani," he said, almost as an afterthought. He did not look for me in the crowd. He just gestured vaguely toward the back. "Who will continue to ensure our sites are running smoothly as our lead foreman. Let us give her a hand for her hard work." A few polite claps. Someone coughed. "Foreman. Not partner. Not VP. Foreman." The same title I had when I was 22. I watched Bianca take the microphone, her voice light and airy, talking about synergy and aesthetics, words that meant nothing when you were trying to keep a 3-story building from collapsing. I looked at my mother in the front row. She was beaming, tears of pride streaming down her face, clapping harder than anyone. She had gotten exactly what she wanted. A picture-perfect family. The beautiful queen, the handsome king, and the worker bee hidden in the back, covered in dirt, making sure the stage did not collapse under their weight. I felt something break inside me. It was not my heart. It was the tether of loyalty I had held onto for nearly a decade. I looked down at my phone. I had an unread email from the licensing board reminding me that the general contractor license for Davis Custom Homes was up for renewal in 48 hours. The license that was in my name. The license that required my signature, my insurance, and my employment as a supervising officer. I looked back up at the stage. Hunter was popping a bottle of champagne, spraying foam over the crowd while Bianca laughed. They looked so happy, so rich, so powerful. They had absolutely no idea that they were standing on a trapdoor, and I was holding the lever. The applause died down, but the ringing in my ears was just getting started. I stood frozen near the magnolia tree, my work boots sinking slightly into the manicured grass. I watched as my father shook hands with the mayor, his back turned to me completely. It was a physical rejection that hurt more than any words he could have spoken. But the real humiliation was walking toward me holding a silk handkerchief and wearing a smile that did not reach his cold, calculating eyes. Hunter descended the stage steps two at a time, radiating the unearned confidence of a man who had never had to work for anything in his life. He adjusted his cufflinks, walked straight up to me, and held out the handkerchief. "Here," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Wipe your face, kiddo. You have got a little smudge of— well, actually, you have got dirt everywhere." I did not take the handkerchief. I just stared at him. This was the man who once asked me if drywall was the same thing as plywood. This was the man who was now my chief operating officer. Hunter chuckled, clearly enjoying his new authority. "Look, Amani. I know you are disappointed. I get it. You have been playing in the dirt for a long time. But running a company like Davis Custom Homes requires a certain pedigree. It requires vision, strategy, big picture thinking." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. "You are the muscle, Imani," he said, patting my shoulder with a patronizing heaviness. "And that is a noble thing to be. Every kingdom needs its draft horses. I am the brain. Bianca is the face. And you are the hands. We all have our roles. You just need to focus on making sure the bricks stack up straight and leave the thinking to us." The rage started in my chest, hot and suffocating. I pushed his hand off my shoulder. "Strategy," I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. "Hunter, you do not even know the difference between commercial and residential zoning codes. Just last week I had to stop you from authorizing cheap insulation that would have violated 3 different fire safety regulations. If I had not caught that, we would be facing a lawsuit right now." Hunter waved his hand dismissively. "Details. You get bogged down in the boring details. That is why you are not CEO material. You do not see the vision. I am talking about synergy. I am talking about expanding into luxury lifestyle branding." I stepped forward, forcing him to take a step back. "Synergy does not keep a 20-story building standing, Hunter. Physics does. Permits do. Safety regulations do. We have 3 inspections coming up next week for the downtown project. Do you even know where the structural reports are filed? Do you know that the concrete mixture needs to cure for another 48 hours before we can load the 3rd floor? Oh my God, make it stop!" The voice cut through the air like breaking glass. Bianca appeared at Hunter's side, looping her arm through his. She looked at me with a mixture of boredom and disgust. "Imani, seriously?" Bianca sighed, rolling her eyes. "This is a party. Nobody wants to hear about concrete and permits. You are boring everyone to tears. Look at the Johnsons. They are trying to enjoy their crab cakes and you are over here talking about dust." I looked at my sister, the new CEO. She was holding her champagne flute like a fashion accessory. "Bianca, this is not a game," I said, trying to make her understand. "This company employs 200 people. Their livelihoods depend on us following the rules. If Hunter misses one inspection deadline, we lose our bond." Bianca laughed, a high-pitched tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "That is why we have you, silly," she said, reaching out to flick a speck of dust off my flannel shirt. "You deal with the messy stuff. You deal with the sweaty men and the loud trucks. I handle the image. I handle the client dinners. I handle being the person people actually want to look at." My mother joined the circle, then completing the suffocating trinity. She placed a protective hand on Bianca's back and looked at me with pity. "Listen to your sister Imani," my mother said softly. "We are not trying to be cruel. We are just being realistic. You have always been rougher around the edges. Even as a child, you preferred playing with blocks instead of dolls. You have calluses on your hands. You wear those awful boots." She gestured to my feet, and I saw several guests look down and whisper. "Some people are born to lead, Imani." My mother continued, her voice taking on a lecturing tone. "And some people are born to serve, to labor. You have a gift for manual work. Why can't you just be happy with that? Why do you have to try to be something you are not? Your sister has the grace of a leader. You have the strength of a worker. Accept it. The silence that followed was absolute. The music seemed to fade away. The chatter of the guests became a distant buzz. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. A worker, a draft horse, someone born to serve. That was all I was to them. All the late nights reviewing blueprints until my eyes burned. All the weekends spent on site in the freezing rain to make sure a pour went smoothly. All the times I saved them from their own incompetence. It meant nothing. To them, I was just a tool. A hammer they could use when they needed it and toss back in the dark toolbox when company came over. I looked at my father on the stage, still basking in the adoration of the crowd. He hadn't even looked my way once since the announcement. He was the one who taught me to read a level. He was the one who told me that quality was the only thing that mattered. But he had sold out quality for an image. I looked at Hunter, who was smirking at me, waiting for me to apologize, to bow my head, to accept my place as the family mule. Something shifted in my chest. It wasn't a snap, it was a release. The heavy weight of obligation I had been carrying for 7 years suddenly vanished. I reached into the deep pocket of my work pants. My fingers closed around the jagged metal of the master key ring. It held the keys to the main office, the equipment yard, the company trucks, and the safe where the blueprints were kept. It also held the key to the brand new Ford F350 company truck I had driven here. I pulled the keys out. The metal jangled loudly in the tense silence. Hunter raised an eyebrow. "Going somewhere, kiddo? Better get back to the site. I want a report on that scaffolding on my desk by Monday morning." I looked him dead in the eye. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "No," I said. My voice was steady. It did not tremble. Hunter blinked. "Excuse me?" I said no, I repeated. "I will not have a report on your desk, because I do not work for you." I took a step closer to him. He was holding his full glass of expensive champagne near his chest. "You think I am just the hands, Hunter? You think I am just the muscle? Well, let us see how far this body goes without a spine." I held the heavy key ring over his glass. "Imani, do not you dare!" my mother warned, her eyes widening. I dropped the keys. They splashed into the golden liquid, overflowing the glass and soaking Hunter's white tuxedo jacket. The heavy metal hit the bottom of the flute with a decisive clink that sounded like a judge's gavel. Hunter gasped and jumped back, dropping the glass. It shattered on the patio stones, mixing champagne with broken glass and the keys to his empire. "You are crazy," Bianca shrieked. "That was vintage Dom Perignon." I did not look at her. I kept my eyes on Hunter. "I quit," I said, effective immediately. "And since I am just a laborer, I assume you surely do not need my help to run a multi-million-dollar corporation. Good luck with the inspection next week. Oh, and Hunter." He was staring at the stain on his jacket, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Try not to authorize any more load-bearing wall removals," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "Unless you want the roof to be part of the basement." I turned around. I did not wait for their response. I could hear my mother screaming my name, screeching about how I was ungrateful, how I was making a scene, how I was ruining everything. "Imani, you get back here. You walk out those gates, and you are dead to us. You hear me? You will starve without us." I kept walking. I walked past the staring guests. I walked past Mrs. Johnson, who looked like she was about to faint. I walked past the valet stand. I did not have a truck anymore. I had left the company vehicle behind. I was walking in my work boots down the long paved driveway of the estate. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I knew who it was. It wasn't my family. They were too busy cleaning up the mess I had made. I reached the heavy iron gates and pushed the pedestrian exit open. As I stepped onto the public sidewalk, the cool evening air hit my face. I took the deepest breath I had taken in years. I had no car. I had no job. I had just declared war on the most powerful construction family in Atlanta. But as I reached for my phone to call a rideshare, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb alongside me. The back window rolled down. It was not a rideshare, and the woman sitting in the back seat was not someone who waited for people. She was looking at me over the rim of her sunglasses, a small smile playing on her lips. I knew exactly who she was, and I knew exactly why she was here. My family thought they had thrown away a broken tool. They were about to find out they had just handed their biggest competitor the blueprints to their destruction. The silence of my one-bedroom apartment usually felt lonely compared to the chaotic noise of the construction sites I managed. But tonight, as I locked the deadbolt behind me and leaned against the cheap metal door, that silence felt like the most expensive luxury in the world. It felt like freedom. I kicked off my steel toe boots, leaving them by the mat, and walked into my small kitchen. My hands were still shaking not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally cutting the cord. My phone, which I had tossed onto the granite countertop, began to vibrate. It buzzed and danced across the surface like an angry hornet. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was, but I picked it up anyway. The messages were flooding in, stacking on top of each other in a frantic stream of abuse. From Mother. You are a disgrace. Do not bother coming home for Thanksgiving. We raised you better than this. From Father. You are making a mistake, Amani. You will never work in this town again. I will make sure of it. Pick up the phone. From Bianca. You ruined my party, you jealous brat. Hunter is furious. You owe him a new tuxedo. I hope you enjoy being unemployed. I read each message, letting the venom sink in. An hour ago, these words would have crushed me. They would have sent me spiraling into a panic, desperate to apologize, desperate to fix whatever I had broken to keep the peace. But the peace was already broken, and looking at these messages now, I realized it had never been peace. It had been silence. It had been submission. I powered the phone off and tossed it onto the sofa. I did not need to hear their threats. I knew something they did not. I walked into my bedroom and knelt before the small fireproof safe I kept in the back of my closet. My fingers traced the keypad, punching in the code. The heavy door clicked open. Inside were my passport, a little cash, and a thick leather binder. I pulled the binder out and sat on the floor, opening it to the first page. Inside, protected by a crisp plastic sheet, was a document with a gold seal from the State Licensing Board of Georgia. It was a general contractor license, Type A, unlimited residential and commercial certification. And right there, in bold black ink, was the name of the qualifying agent, Imani Davis. My family seemed to have forgotten how construction laws worked in America. You cannot just open a company and start building skyscrapers because you have a nice logo and a charming smile. You need a qualifier. You need a licensed individual who takes legal responsibility for every beam, every wire, and every pipe. For the last 7 years, that individual had been me. My father's license had expired due to negligence 3 years ago. He had been too busy golfing to take the continuing education credits. He had panicked, terrified of losing contracts. I remembered that night clearly. He had sat me down, poured me a drink, and told me he needed me to step up. He told me to take the exams. He told me to put my name on the state filings. He said it was just a formality. I ran my hand over the paper. I remembered studying for that exam. While Bianca was out clubbing in Buckhead, spending our parents' money on bottle service and designer bags, I was sitting at my kitchen table at 3 in the morning, memorizing load-bearing calculations and fire codes. I remembered the dark circles under my eyes. I remembered missing my best friend's wedding because I had to prep for the structural integrity test. I did it because I thought I was building our future. I thought I was investing in a legacy that I would one day lead. I closed the binder. The nostalgia was gone. Now all I saw was leverage. They thought Davis Custom Homes was a building. They thought it was the trucks, the tools, and the bank accounts. They were wrong. Davis Custom Homes was a shell. I was the engine. And without the engine, the car does not move. I stood up and walked to my laptop. I sat down at my desk and cracked my knuckles. The blue light of the screen illuminated the dark room. I navigated to the Georgia State Licensing Board portal. My login information was saved. I clicked through to the qualifying agent section. There it was. My name linked to Davis Custom Homes. Status active. I clicked the edit button. My heart beat a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. This was the nuclear option. Once I did this, there was no going back. This would not just hurt their feelings. It would freeze their operations. Every active permit in the city would be flagged. Every inspection would be canceled. Every bank loan that required a licensed contractor on record would be defaulted. I typed in the reason for disassociation: resignation, lack of oversight, unsafe working conditions. I hesitated for only a fraction of a second. I thought about the crew. I thought about Mr. Henderson, the old foreman who had taught me how to drive a forklift. This would hurt them too. But I knew the crew would follow me. They respected the person who stood in the mud with them, not the person who watched from the balcony. I hit submit. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to remove your license from this entity? This will result in the immediate suspension of all construction activities associated with this license number. I clicked yes, done. I leaned back in my chair. It was finished. As of this moment, Davis Custom Homes was illegally operating every single one of its job sites. I was not done yet. I opened my personal email. There was a message sitting in my inbox from 3 days ago. It was from a woman named Mrs. Evelyn Gable. Mrs. Gable was a legend in Atlanta. She was a self-made billionaire who owned half the skyline. My father hated her. He called her a shark. He called her ruthless. He hated her because she had started with nothing just like him, but she had built an empire 10 times the size of his, and she had done it without cutting corners. She had been trying to poach me for 2 years. She had seen my work on the Midtown Library renovation. She had sent me offers that would have tripled my salary. But I had always said no. I had always said I had to stay loyal to family. I opened her email. Subject: the offer still stands. Body Imani. I saw the reports on the library project. Impeccable work. You are wasting your talent carrying dead weight. When you are ready to build something real, call me. I hit reply. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I did not need to draft a long cover letter. I did not need to explain myself. Mrs. Gable appreciated brevity. Dear Mrs. Gable, I am ready. I am bringing my license, my expertise, and my crew. I can start Monday. Sincerely, Imani. I sent the email. A sense of calm washed over me. It was the calm of a demolition expert who has set the charges and is now just walking away, waiting for the inevitable boom. My phone on the couch buzzed again and again. They were probably calling to demand I apologize. They were probably sitting around the dinner table, drinking their expensive wine, laughing about how I would come crawling back in a week when I ran out of money. They had no idea that come Monday morning, when the city inspectors showed up at the sites, the gates would be locked. They had no idea that Hunter would be standing in front of a half-finished building with no legal authority to hammer a single nail. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Bianca was probably posting a selfie with her new CEO title. Enjoy the weekend, sister, I whispered to the glass, because Monday is going to be a very bad day. 2 weeks had passed since I walked out of the family estate and into the back of Mrs. Gable's limousine. For me, those 2 weeks were a blur of productive meetings, reviewing legitimate architectural plans, and setting up my new office, which ironically looked out over the city skyline my family was currently trying to destroy. But for Davis Custom Homes, those 2 weeks were a slow-motion car crash that everyone saw coming except the people driving. I was not physically present at the Heights, the $10 million luxury condo project that was supposed to be my father's legacy. But I did not need to be. My phone was buzzing every hour with updates from the crew. You see, you can fire a foreman, or you can force a project manager to quit, but you cannot buy the loyalty of the men and women who actually pour the concrete. They knew who had signed their paychecks for the last 5 years. They knew who ensured they had safety harnesses that actually worked. According to Mr. Henderson, my 60-year-old site supervisor, who had been with the company since before I was born, the chaos started on Monday morning at 7 a.m. sharp. The lumber delivery for the framing of the third floor never arrived. When Henderson called the supplier, they told him the account was on hold because the credit authorization signature on file was mine, and I was no longer an authorized representative. When Henderson asked Hunter to call and update the payment details, my brother-in-law asked if they could just use wood from Home Depot instead. By Wednesday, the schedule was already 4 days behind. By Friday of the second week, the site looked less like a construction zone and more like a daycare center run by toddlers. Then came the incident that would become legendary in the Atlanta construction community. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The Georgia heat was brutal, pushing 95 degrees with humidity that made the air feel like soup. The crew was exhausted trying to make up for lost time caused by Hunter's logistical failures. That was when a shiny white Porsche Cayenne pulled onto the gravel lot, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled onto the freshly painted siding of the model unit. Out stepped Bianca. Mr. Henderson told me later that he actually rubbed his eyes because he thought he was hallucinating from heat stroke. My sister, the new CEO of a major construction firm, had arrived for her first official site inspection wearing a white linen power suit and 10-inch Christian Louboutin stilettos. She was not wearing a hard hat. She was not wearing safety goggles. She was wearing oversized designer sunglasses and holding a venti iced latte. She marched onto the site like she was walking the runway at Paris Fashion Week. The workers stopped their hammers. The excavators went silent. Everyone just watched as she navigated the uneven terrain, her heels sinking into the dirt with every step, creating a pattern of little holes behind her. "Excuse me," she shouted, waving her hand at a guy operating a jackhammer 50 feet away. "Can you turn that noise down? I am trying to record a story for the company Instagram." Mr. Henderson walked over to her, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Ms. Davis," he said respectfully, "you cannot be here without protective gear. It is an active zone, and those shoes are a liability." Bianca pulled down her sunglasses and looked at him like he was a bug on her windshield. "Excuse me," she said. "I am the CEO. I can wear whatever I want. This is my site, and frankly, this place is a mess." "Why is there dirt everywhere?" "It is a construction site, ma'am," Henderson said, trying to keep his patience. "We are digging the foundation for the pool house." "We'll clean it up," she snapped. "We have investors coming tomorrow. I want this dirt gone." She turned to walk away, trying to make a dramatic exit toward the unfinished pool house. What she did not realize, because she had never looked at a site plan in her life, was that the crew had just poured a fresh slab of concrete for the patio walkway 10 minutes ago. It had been smoothed and leveled perfectly. Bianca took 3 confident steps and sank. The wet concrete swallowed her designer heels, instantly sucking them down past the ankles. She shrieked a sound that Mr. Henderson described as similar to a cat being stepped on. She tried to pull her foot out, but the suction of the drying mix held fast. She lost her balance and flailed her arms, sending the iced latte flying through the air before she toppled sideways. She landed hard. Her white linen suit hit the gray sludge with a wet slap. The entire site went dead silent. 50 grown men were trying desperately not to laugh. "My shoes," Bianca screamed, trashing in the wet cement like a trapped bird. "These are red bottoms. Do you know how much these cost? Help me." Mr. Henderson rushed forward to help her up, his boots splashing through the mix he had just spent 2 hours leveling. He grabbed her arm and hoisted her up. She came up dripping gray slime, her suit ruined, her hair plastered to her face. One of her shoes remained stuck in the concrete, a $1,200 monument to her stupidity. "You idiot," she yelled, shoving Mr. Henderson away. "You did this on purpose. You didn't put up a sign." "It is wet concrete, ma'am," Henderson said, his voice tightening. "It looks like wet concrete." "You are fired," she screamed, pointing a sludge-covered finger at his chest. "Get off my site. I want you gone. Now." Mr. Henderson stood tall. He looked at the woman who was half his age, who had never done a hard day's work in her life. He looked at the crew watching him. "With pleasure," he said. He took off his hard hat and tucked it under his arm. Good luck getting that shoe out before it sets. As Bianca hobbled back to her Porsche, screaming into her phone for an assistant to bring her a towel, Hunter emerged from the trailer. He had missed the fall, but he saw the commotion. He walked over, stepping carefully around the puddles, holding a set of blueprints that were rolled up the wrong way. "All right, back to work, people." Hunter clapped his hands. "We are behind schedule. Let us pick up the pace." He walked over to where the framing crew was working on the main clubhouse. He looked at the plans, frowned, and then pointed to a large wooden wall that ran down the center of the structure. "This wall," Hunter said, tapping the wood. "It blocks the flow. Bianca wants an open concept for the spa area. Take it down." The new foreman, a young guy named Marcus who had stepped up when Henderson was fired 5 minutes ago, looked at Hunter with wide eyes. "Sir, we cannot take that down," Marcus said. "Do not tell me what I can and cannot do," Hunter interrupted, putting on his best assertive executive voice. "I am the COO. I say we need space. The room feels claustrophobic. Take the wall down and put in a support beam later if we need it." Sir Marcus tried again. "That is a load-bearing wall. It is holding up the roof trusses for the second floor. If we take that down, the roof collapses." Hunter laughed. A condescending, arrogant laugh. "Listen to me, buddy. I have watched enough HGTV to know that you guys always say it is load-bearing because you do not want to do the demo work. It is just wood. The roof is not that heavy. Take it down. That is a direct order." Marcus looked at the wall. He looked at the roof above it, which was currently supporting 3 tons of shingles and HVAC units. He looked at his crew, who were all shaking their heads. "No," Marcus said. "Excuse me." Hunter stepped closer, his face turning red. "Did you not just see my wife fire the last guy who talked back? Do you want to join him in the unemployment line?" "I would rather be unemployed than dead," Marcus said calmly. "And I am definitely not going to prison for manslaughter when that roof kills someone." Hunter threw the blueprints on the ground. "Fine. If you are all too lazy to do it, I will get a crew in here who will. I am docking everyone's pay for today until this wall is down." That was the breaking point. It was not the insults. It was not the firing of Mr. Henderson. It was the threat to their safety and their paychecks by a man who thought HGTV was a substitute for an engineering degree. Marcus reached for his tool belt. He unclipped it and let it drop to the dusty ground. "Lunchtime, boys," Marcus said loud and clear. One by one, every carpenter, electrician, and plumber on that site unclipped their belts. The sound of heavy leather hitting the dirt echoed across the lot. They did not shout. They did not argue. They just stopped. They walked over to the shade of the large oak trees at the edge of the property, opened their coolers, and sat down. Hunter stood alone in the middle of the skeleton frame of the clubhouse. "What are you doing?" Hunter yelled. "Get back to work. I am paying you to build, not to eat sandwiches." Marcus took a bite of his apple and looked at his watch. "We are on union-mandated break, boss. And after that, I think we have a safety meeting. Might take all afternoon." Hunter stood there, surrounded by silence, staring at the load-bearing wall he so desperately wanted to destroy. He had the title. He had the suit. He had the blueprints. But he had absolutely no power. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Marcus. Text message reads, "Henderson is out. Bianca is covered in cement. Hunter just tried to kill us with a roof collapse. We are sitting this one out. When are you coming back, boss?" I smiled and took a sip of my coffee in my air-conditioned office. I typed back a single line. "Not yet. Let them break it a little more." I did not know then that Hunter, in his infinite arrogance, would not just let the crew sit. Desperate to prove his authority and terrified of admitting failure to the investors coming the next day, he was about to make a phone call that would turn a construction delay into a criminal investigation. He was about to try and find a crew that did not ask questions about permits or gravity, and that decision was going to cost him a lot more than a pair of shoes. Wednesday morning brought a visitor that every construction site manager fears. But in this case, the crew watching from the shade of the oak trees seemed almost eager to see him arrival. It was a white sedan with the seal of the city of Atlanta emblazoned on the door. The car pulled up right next to Hunter's dusty luxury SUV, and out stepped David Ramirez, the senior building inspector for the district. I had known David for 6 years. We had walked countless floors together, arguing over conduit placement and fire suppression systems. He was a man who did not smile, did not take bribes, and had a memory like a steel trap. He respected two things: honesty and safety regulations. Hunter possessed neither. From my office across town, I could only imagine the scene. But Marcus, my former foreman, texted me the play-by-play later that evening, and the details were sweeter than any revenge fantasy I could have conjured. According to Marcus, Hunter was standing near the trailer, still screaming into his phone about the load-bearing wall when David slammed his car door shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet, tension-filled air of the stalled site. Hunter spun around, annoyed at the interruption. He adjusted his suit jacket, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and put on his best corporate smile. "Can I help you?" Hunter asked, stepping forward but not offering a hand. "We are in the middle of a critical phase here, so if this is a solicitation, you will have to leave." David did not blink. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the clipboard in his hand, then back up at the half-built structure of the clubhouse. "I am not a solicitor," David said, his voice flat and authoritative. "I am Senior Inspector Ramirez with the Department of Buildings. I am here for the framing and rough-in inspection scheduled for today." Hunter's face relaxed into a smirk. He clearly thought this was just a formality, a box to be checked. "Oh, right, the inspection," Hunter said, waving a hand dismissively. "Go ahead and take a look around. It is all top-notch. We are actually rethinking the design of the clubhouse to be more open concept, so ignore that wall in the middle." David frowned. "You are modifying the structural plans without submitting a revision," Hunter laughed. "It is just a wall, officer. We are agile here. We move fast." David stared at him for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he looked around the site. "Where is the general contractor?" David asked. "I need to speak with the qualifier on record. I am the chief operating officer." Hunter puffed out his chest. "I am in charge here." David shook his head. "That is not what I asked. State law requires a licensed qualifying agent to be present or directly supervising all major structural modifications. The permit for this site is issued under the license of Imani Davis." "Is she here?" Hunter's smile faltered. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes, but he buried it quickly under layers of arrogance. "Ms. Davis is no longer with the company," Hunter said, his tone turning icy. "We are restructuring. I am overseeing all operations now." David stopped writing on his clipboard. He looked up slowly. "Excuse me," David said. "Did you say the license holder is no longer with the company?" "That is correct," Hunter said, sounding annoyed. "She was, let us say, not a good fit for our new direction. But do not worry, my father-in-law, Isaiah Davis, owns the company. We are all good." David pulled a tablet out of his bag. He tapped the screen a few times, his brow furrowing. Hunter shifted his weight from one foot to the other, checking his watch, clearly wishing this annoying public servant would just go away. "Mr. Hunter, is it?" David asked without looking up. "It is Mr. Vance," Hunter corrected. "Mr. Vance." David turned the tablet screen toward him. According to the State Licensing Board database, which was updated 48 hours ago, the general contractor license associated with Davis Custom Homes has been disassociated by the qualifier. Hunter squinted at the screen. "So, what does that mean?" "It means," David said, his voice rising just enough to carry across the silent job site, "that as of 2 days ago, Davis Custom Homes is an unlicensed entity. You have no legal authority to build a doghouse in this city, let alone a $10 million condo complex." The color drained from Hunter's face. He looked like he had just swallowed a lemon. "That is ridiculous," Hunter sputtered. "My father-in-law has been building in this city for 30 years. It is a paperwork error. I will have my assistant fix it. Just do the inspection and let us get back to work." David stepped closer, and for the first time, Hunter looked small. This is not a parking ticket, son. This is the law. Without a valid GC license attached to your company, your insurance is void, your bonds are void, and every permit issued to this project is immediately suspended. Hunter laughed nervously. Come on, buddy. We can work this out. There has to be a way to keep things moving while we file the papers. Maybe we can settle this. Hunter reached for his wallet. It was the stupidest thing he could have possibly done. David's eyes went cold. He pulled a bright red sticker out of his bag. It was the dreaded stop work order. If you are suggesting what I think you are suggesting, I will have you arrested right now, David said. He walked past Hunter, marching up to the main construction trailer. He slapped the red sticker onto the door and smoothed it down with his hand. The sound of the adhesive sticking to the metal was the sound of a guillotine dropping. This site is now shut down, David announced, his voice booming. No personnel are allowed to perform any work. No deliveries are to be accepted. Hunter ran after him. You cannot do this. We are losing money every second we are not building. David turned around. Then you better find a licensed contractor fast. Because until you do, the fine for operating an active site without a license is $5,000. $5,000 is nothing, Hunter scoffed. We will pay it. Per day. David finished the sentence. Per violation. And looking around here, I see about 10 safety violations just from where I am standing. So you are looking at roughly $50,000 a day in fines until this red tag comes down. Hunter stopped dead in his tracks. $50,000 a day. David got back into his car. I will be back tomorrow to make sure nobody is working. If I see a single hammer moving, I am calling the police to arrest the site manager. Have a nice day, Mr. Vance. The white sedan drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and absolute silence in its wake. Hunter stood there staring at the red tag. His hands were shaking. He looked at the crew. They were all standing up now, packing their lunchboxes. Where are you going? Hunter screamed, his voice cracking. Home, Marcus yelled back. We do not work on red-tagged sites, boss, unless you are paying our bail money. Within 5 minutes, the site was empty. The excavator sat silent. The wind whistled through the half-built frames. Hunter was alone in the middle of his empire of dirt. My phone sitting on the mahogany desk in my new office began to vibrate. I looked at the screen. Hunter Vance. I let it ring. It stopped. Then it rang again immediately. I picked up the phone, but I did not answer. I just watched the name flash on the screen. I could imagine him standing there sweating in his ruined suit, realizing for the first time that his MBA and his arrogance could not fix a legal black hole. He left a voicemail, then another, then a text. Imani pickup. There is a misunderstanding with the city. We need your login for the licensing portal. It is urgent. Call me back now. I took a sip of my iced tea. I turned my chair to face the window. In the distance, I could see the cranes of the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Hunter was learning the most expensive lesson of his life. I did not block his number. I wanted to see every desperate plea. I wanted to see the panic rise as the sun went down, and he realized that tomorrow, another $50,000 bill was coming due. I typed a message to Mrs. Gable instead. Project update. Davis Custom Homes has been red tagged. Their schedule is dead. Mrs. Gable replied instantly with a single emoji. A champagne glass. I put the phone down. The karma had arrived and it was wearing a city inspector's badge. But this was just the beginning. Hunter was cornered, and like any rat in a corner, he was about to do something dangerous. He was going to try to blame the only person he couldn't control. Me. While Hunter was sweating through his silk shirt in a parking lot filled with angry contractors, I was standing 500 feet in the air looking down at the city of Atlanta through a wall of floor-to-ceiling glass. The air conditioning in the penthouse conference room of Gable Enterprises was set to a crisp 68 degrees. But the warmth spreading through my chest had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the heat of validation. I picked up the heavy fountain pen from the mahogany table. The ink was black and permanent, just like the decision I was about to make. Across from me sat Mrs. Evelyn Gable, a woman who had built more of this city than the mayor himself. She was watching me not with the critical, nitpicking gaze my mother always used, but with a look of genuine respect. To my right lay a contract for the Midtown Eco Living Project. It was a massive undertaking involving the renovation of 3 historic textile mills into sustainable luxury apartments. The project value was $5 million, and the name on the line for lead project director was not Davis Custom Homes. It was Imani Davis, independent contractor. I looked down at myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't wearing a flannel shirt covered in sawdust. I was wearing a tailored navy blue blazer that fit my shoulders perfectly. But when I looked down at my feet, I smiled. Beneath the sharp crease of my dress pants, I was still wearing my steel-toe Timberlands. Mrs. Gable had noticed them earlier. She hadn't sneered like my sister. She had just laughed and said that she never trusted a builder who wore shoes they couldn't run in. I signed my name. The scratch of the pen against the paper sounded like a lock clicking open. "Welcome to the team, Imani," Mrs. Gable said, extending her hand. "We have been waiting for someone who actually reads the fine print." I shook her hand. It was firm, calloused, and strong. "Thank you, Evelyn. It feels good to finally be building something that will last." We were just about to open a bottle of sparkling water to celebrate when my personal cell phone buzzed on the table. I frowned. I had changed my number 3 days ago, specifically to avoid the barrage of abuse from my family. Only a handful of people had this new number. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown caller ID. My stomach tightened instinctively, a phantom reflex from years of conditioning. But then I looked around the room. I looked at the contract. I looked at the view. I wasn't the scared little girl hiding in the utility closet anymore. I picked up the phone. I did not say hello. I just pressed the answer button and waited. Imani, the voice on the other end, screeched so loud that Mrs. Gable could hear it from across the table. It was my mother, Loretta. She didn't sound like the poised socialite she pretended to be at parties. She sounded unhinged. "I know you are there," she yelled. "I had to pay a private investigator $500 to find this number. Do you have any idea what you have done?" I calmly pressed the speakerphone button and set the device back on the mahogany table. Mrs. Gable raised an eyebrow but didn't look away. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, witnessing the reality I had escaped. "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice steady and cool. "I assume you are calling to congratulate me on my new job." "Congratulate you?" Loretta laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "I am calling to tell you to get your behind down to the city building department right now. Hunter just called me. He says the inspectors shut down the site. He says they red-tagged the whole project because of some paperwork you messed up." "I didn't mess up anything, Mother," I said, picking up my glass of water. "I simply removed my personal property from the company. My license belongs to me. It is not a family heirloom I can just leave on the mantelpiece." "You are killing your father," she screamed. "Do you hear me? He is clutching his chest right now. If he has a heart attack, it is on your hands. You selfish, ungrateful little girl. We gave you everything. We gave you a job. We gave you a purpose. And this is how you repay us, by sabotaging your sister's success because you are jealous." I looked at Mrs. Gable. She rolled her eyes and shook her head, mouthing the word unbelievable. "I am not jealous, Mother," I said. "And I am not sabotaging anyone. I am just letting the new CEO do her job. Bianca is a genius, right? She has the vision. She has the style. Surely she can handle a little administrative hurdle." "She cannot handle this, and you know it?" Loretta snapped, her voice breaking into a sob that sounded entirely performance-based. "She is crying in her office. She doesn't know how to deal with these inspectors. They are rude to her. They don't respect her. You need to come back and fix this. Just sign the papers, Imani. Come back, apologize to Hunter for the scene you caused, and we might let you keep your job as foreman." I laughed. It was a genuine deep laugh that bubbled up from my chest. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, with their empire burning down, they were still trying to negotiate my surrender. "You might let me," I repeated. "Mom, let me be clear. I am currently sitting in a meeting for a project that is worth more than Dad's entire company. I am not coming back to be a foreman. I am not coming back to be a scapegoat." "Then you are dead to us," she hissed. "If you do not fix this today, do not ever call yourself a Davis again." I leaned closer to the phone. "That is fine by me," I said. "But here is some free advice for your genius CEO. If Bianca wants to get the red tag removed, she needs to apply for her own general contractor license. It is a great process. She just needs a 4-year degree in construction management or engineering, which I know she doesn't have. Then she needs 3 years of documented field experience under a licensed supervisor, which she definitely doesn't have because she refuses to wear boots. So if she starts today, she should be legal to run that site by the time she turns 40. There was silence on the other end. The math was hitting her. The timeline was sinking in. They didn't have 7 years. They didn't have 7 days. "You are a monster," Loretta whispered. "No, Mother," I said softly. "I am just a worker." And the worker has left the building. I ended the call. I didn't just hang up. I blocked the number immediately. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of a storm passing. Mrs. Gable picked up her glass of sparkling water. To family, she said, her eyes twinkling with a knowing wisdom, and the wisdom to know when to fire them. I clinked my glass against hers. "To new foundations," I said. I stood up and walked to the window. Far below in the distance, I could see the tiny speck that was the Heights project. Even from here, I could see that the cranes were not moving. It was a monument to their arrogance frozen in time. I felt a surge of power that I had never experienced before. For years, I had believed their lie. I had believed that I needed them, that I was nothing without the Davis name. But the truth was the opposite. They were the parasites and I was the host. And now that I had detached myself, I wasn't withering away. I was thriving. But I knew my mother. I knew that call wasn't the end. Loretta Davis did not accept defeat. She didn't understand laws or logic, she only understood appearances. And right now I was making them look bad. If they couldn't force me back, they would try to destroy me. They would try to make sure that if the Davis ship went down, I would drown with it. I turned back to Mrs. Gable. "Evelyn," I said, "we need to secure the site logs and the server data for the new project immediately. My brother-in-law is desperate. And desperate men do stupid things." Mrs. Gable nodded. "My legal team is already on it." "But tell me, Imani, what is their next move?" I looked at my phone thinking about Bianca's crying face and Hunter's bruised ego. "They are going to try to rewrite history," I said. "They are going to tell the world that I didn't quit. They are going to say I was fired for cause. They are going to try to ruin my reputation so I can't work in this town again." I was right. Across town in the panic-stricken office of Davis Custom Homes, Hunter was already on the phone with his lawyer. He wasn't asking how to get a license. He was asking how to frame me for corporate sabotage. He was about to light a match that would blow up in his face, but he was too stupid to smell the gas leak I had already exposed. The view from my new office was spectacular, but the view on my phone screen was hideous. I was in the middle of reviewing the structural steel orders for the eco-living project when my notification feed exploded. It was not the usual stream of emails or calendar reminders. It was a barrage of tags, mentions, and direct messages on Instagram. They were coming in so fast that my battery percentage dropped by 2 points in a minute. I saw the source of the chaos. Bianca Davis is live. Against my better judgment, I clicked the notification. My phone screen filled with my sister's face. She was sitting in her home office, the one with the expensive ring light and the strategically placed bookshelves filled with books she had never read. But today the glamour was gone. She was not wearing makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked tired, fragile, and utterly defeated. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Hey guys, she whispered, wiping a tear from her cheek. I know I am usually all about positivity and boss babe energy, but today I just cannot fake it anymore. My family is under attack. I watched in silence as the viewer count climbed to 5,000. You all know my sister Imani? She continued, her voice trembling. The one I have supported for years. The one my parents gave a job to when nobody else would hire her because she did not have the right look. Well, we found out today why our construction sites have been shut down. I leaned forward. I was genuinely curious what lie she had concocted to explain the red tags. Imani planted a virus in our company server before she quit. Bianca sobbed. She wiped everything. Our client lists, our payroll data, the architectural plans for the orphanage we were building pro bono. She destroyed it all because she was jealous that my father chose me to lead the company. My jaw dropped. Orphanage. There was no orphanage. They were building luxury condos for tech bros. She stole our proprietary data, Bianca went on, sniffing loudly. She is contacting our clients right now, trying to steal them for her new partner. It breaks my heart because I loved her. I trusted her. And she stabbed me in the back because she could not handle seeing her little sister shine. The comment section was scrolling so fast it was a blur of hate. Your sister is a snake. Sue her for everything she has. I hope she goes to jail. Jealousy is a disease. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. It was not fear. It was nausea. I was watching a public execution of my character, orchestrated by a woman who could not even convert a PDF file, let alone understand how a computer virus worked. I closed the app, but the damage was already bleeding into the real world. My work email pinged. It was a message from a boutique tile supplier I had lined up for the mill renovation. Subject: cancellation of order. Dear Ms. Davis, in light of recent allegations regarding data security and corporate theft, we feel it is best to pause our business relationship. We wish you the best. I stared at the screen. They were canceling a $50,000 order based on an Instagram live stream. Then my office phone rang. It was Mrs. Gable's executive assistant. Imani, she said, her voice tight. We are getting calls, reporters, bloggers. They are asking if Gable Enterprises condones corporate espionage. Mrs. Gable knows it is nonsense, but the board is asking questions. I closed my eyes. This was their plan. If they could not force me back to do the work, they would burn the ground I stood on, so I had nowhere else to go. They wanted to make me toxic. They wanted to starve me out until I had no choice but to crawl back to them for scraps. I was about to call my lawyer when the intercom on my desk buzzed. Ms. Davis, the receptionist said, "There is a gentleman here to see you. He says it is urgent legal business." "Send him in," I said, my voice flat. A man in a rumpled gray suit walked in. He did not look me in the eye. He just walked up to my desk, placed a thick envelope on top of my blueprints, and mumbled the words that officially turned this family feud into a war. "You have been served." He turned and walked out before I could even touch the envelope. I opened it. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was a lawsuit filed in the Superior Court of Fulton County. Plaintiff Davis Custom Homes and Hunter Vance. Defendant Imani Davis. I scanned the document. The charges were breathtaking in their creativity. Count 1, breach of fiduciary duty. Count 2, intentional interference with business relations. Count 3, theft of trade secrets. Count 4, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And then I saw the number at the bottom, the damages they were seeking. $2 million. They were suing me for $2 million. They claimed my resignation was a calculated act of sabotage designed to bankrupt the company. They claimed the imaginary virus I planted had cost them millions in lost data. They claimed my refusal to share my license was a breach of an implied verbal contract. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from Hunter. "I told you I would handle the strategy. We can make this go away, Imani. Just come back. Sign the license over. Admit you were overwhelmed and made a mistake. We will drop the lawsuit and tell the world we forgave you. Or you can spend the next 5 years in court and lose every penny you have. Your choice, kiddo. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the lawsuit. Then I looked at the canceled tile order on my screen. They had cornered me. Or at least that is what they thought. They thought this wall of paper and public lies would crush me. They thought I would be too scared of the bad publicity to fight back. But they had made one fatal error. In their rush to fabricate a story about a virus and stolen data, they had opened the door to discovery. By suing me, they had given me the legal right to demand evidence. They had given me the right to subpoena their servers, their emails, and their financial records to prove my innocence. Hunter thought he was burying me under a mountain of legal trouble. He did not realize he had just handed me a shovel. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. "Hello," he answered. "I saw the live stream, Imani. It is ugly." "It is about to get uglier," I said, staring at the lawsuit. "They just sued me for $2 million. There was a long silence on the line. Then my lawyer let out a low whistle. $2 million. They are swinging for the fences. Do you want to settle?" "No," I said. "I want you to file a countermotion immediately, and I want you to hire a forensic accountant." "A forensic accountant?" he asked. "Why?" "Because I said my eyes landing on the section of the lawsuit where Hunter claimed lost profits. They are accusing me of stealing money and data. That means we have the right to audit their books to verify exactly how much money they actually had before I left." I paused, thinking about the unapproved steel sales I had suspected, thinking about the weird invoices I had seen on Hunter's desk months ago. "I do not think they are suing me because they think they can win," I told my lawyer. "I think they are suing me to scare me into silence before the bank finds out the money is already gone." I hung up the phone. The fear was gone. The nausea was gone. Replaced by the cold, hard focus of a demolition expert identifying the weak point in a crumbling building. Bianca wanted a show. Hunter wanted a war. I was going to give them both. But they were not going to like the ending. I looked at the comments on the live stream one last time. "Imani is a thief." I smiled. "No, I am not a thief. I am the auditor." And I was about to open the books. While the internet tore my reputation apart piece by digital piece, I sat in the windowless server room of Gable Enterprises. The air was cold and hummed with the sound of cooling fans. I did not record a reaction video. I did not post a tearful defense on Twitter. I did what I always did. I went to the source. Sitting across from me were two men. David Sterling was my new attorney, a shark in a three-piece suit who specialized in corporate litigation. Next to him was Tyrell, an old friend from my engineering days at Georgia Tech, who now ran his own cybersecurity firm. Tyrell's fingers flew across his mechanical keyboard, the rhythmic clicking the only sound in the room. Hunter and Bianca had made a critical error that most narcissists make. They assumed that because they held the title of CEO and COO, they controlled the information. They thought that by changing the password to the main office email account, they had locked me out. But they didn't understand that I had built the digital infrastructure of Davis Custom Homes from the ground up. I hadn't just set up email accounts. I had implemented a cloud-based project management system that tracked every material order, every GPS log from the company trucks, and every bank transaction in real time. And like any good architect, I had left a back door. Tyrell hit the enter key with a flourish. "We are in," he said, spinning his monitor around. They changed the front door lock, but left the basement window wide open. "I have root access to everything." I leaned in my eyes, scanning the familiar dashboard. It was a digital ghost of the company I used to run. But as I looked closer, I saw the rot. "Let's start with the inventory," I said, pointing to the logs for the Heights project. "Hunter claims I stole data. Let's see what he has been doing with the physical assets." We pulled up the material orders for the last 3 months. I knew these numbers by heart. I knew we had ordered 40 tons of structural steel beams for the main clubhouse and the underground parking structure. It was high-grade American steel, expensive and vital for the building's integrity. "Here is the purchase order," Tyrell said, highlighting a row. "Paid in full. Delivery confirmed, signed by Hunter Vance." "Okay," I said. "Now cross-reference that with the installation logs." Tyrell opened the daily site reports. These were the digital checklists the site foreman had to fill out every day. "That is weird?" Tyrell frowned. "The installation logs only account for 70% of the steel." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. That can't be right. If they only installed 70%, the building wouldn't pass the initial load test. Where is the other 30%? We dug deeper. We tracked the GPS data of the delivery trucks on the day the steel arrived. The logs showed the trucks arriving at the site at 8 a.m. But then, 20 minutes later, 2 of the flatbeds left the site still fully loaded. "Where did they go?" Sterling asked, leaning forward. Tyrell traced the route on the map. "They didn't go to another Davis job site. They drove 20 miles south to an industrial park off the highway. They stopped at a place called Miller's Scrap and Salvage." My stomach turned. Hunter hadn't just mismanaged the steel, he had sold it. He had taken brand new high-grade structural steel and sold it for pennies on the dollar as scrap metal. "Follow the money," I commanded. Tyrell hacked into the accounting software. We found a wire transfer from Miller's Scrap and Salvage for $45,000. It was coded in the ledger as refund for defective material. But the money didn't go into the company operating account. It was transferred immediately to a personal account. Tyrell tapped a few more keys. It went to a private account under the name H. Vance. And then 10 minutes later, it was transferred to a cryptocurrency exchange platform. "He is gambling it," I whispered, realizing the scale of the disaster. "He is literally dismantling the building to buy Dogecoin." Sterling let out a low whistle. "That is grand larceny. That is embezzlement. And if that building collapses because of missing steel, it is conspiracy to commit manslaughter." But we weren't done. The hole in the company was deeper than just Hunter's gambling addiction. I needed to see how they afforded Bianca's lifestyle. I needed to know where the money for that Porsche came from. "Pull up the HR accounts," I said. "Check the Employee Provident Fund." My father had set up that fund 20 years ago. It was a pension plan for our long-term employees. Men like Mr. Henderson who had given their lives to the company. It was supposed to be untouchable. Tyrell opened the file. The screen was a sea of red numbers. "Oh my God," Tyrell said quietly. "On the day before Bianca bought her white Porsche, there was a withdrawal of $180,000. "Who authorized it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Please tell me it was Hunter. Please tell me it wasn't him." Tyrell clicked on the transaction details. The authorization signature wasn't Hunter's messy scrawl. It was a digital signature key that belonged to one person only: Isaiah Davis. I stared at my father's name on the screen. I felt tears prick my eyes, hot and angry. My father, the man who stood in church every Sunday, the man who lectured me about honor and duty, had raided the retirement savings of his most loyal workers to buy a luxury car for his golden child. He didn't just overlook Hunter's incompetence. He financed their vanity with stolen money. Sterling stood up and buttoned his jacket. He looked at me with a grim expression. "Imani," he said seriously, "we came here to find evidence to defend you against a civil lawsuit. But what we found is a federal indictment waiting to happen. This is RICO territory. This is systematic fraud." I looked at the screen one last time. I saw the empty steel orders. I saw the drained pension fund. I saw the ruin of everything my grandfather had started. I thought about Mr. Henderson sitting at home unemployed because my sister fired him not knowing that his retirement money was parked in my sister's driveway. I thought about the live stream Bianca was doing right now, calling me a thief. "Do we have enough to win?" I asked Sterling. He laughed a dry, humorless sound. "Win, Imani. If we take this to the district attorney, your brother-in-law is going to prison for 10 years. Your father might go for 5, and your sister will lose everything she owns." He paused. Are you sure you want to do this? It is the nuclear option. Once we pull this trigger, there is no going back. The family is done. I stood up. I walked over to the printer where Tyrell was already printing out the hard copies of the bank transfers and the GPS logs. I picked up the warm paper. It felt heavy. It felt like justice. They sued me for $2 million, I said, my voice hard as the steel they stole. They tried to destroy my name so I couldn't work. They hurt the men and women I promised to protect. I looked at Sterling. Draft the counter-complaint, I said. But don't just file it in civil court. Prepare a package for the IRS and the district attorney's office. I am not just going to beat them in court, I said, turning to leave the room. I am going to make sure they can never hurt anyone again. I walked out of the server room and into the bright light of the hallway. My phone buzzed again. It was another notification from Instagram. A friend had sent me a screenshot of Bianca's story. She was holding a glass of wine, smiling with the caption, "Justice is coming for you, Imani." I smiled back at the screen. She was right. Justice was coming. But it wasn't wearing high heels. It was wearing work boots, and it had the receipts. The smell of caramelized yams and baked mac and cheese hit me before I even opened the heavy oak front door of my parents' estate. It was a scent designed to disarm me. My mother Loretta knew that comfort food was my weakness. She knew that whenever I was sick or heartbroken as a child, the smell of her cooking was the only thing that could make me feel safe. But tonight, as I stepped into the foyer, that delicious aroma did not smell like love. It smelled like bait. I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates that were usually reserved for Easter and Christmas. My father sat at the head of the table looking stern, but benevolent. Bianca was seated to his right, looking pale and refusing to make eye contact with me. And Hunter sat next to her, swirling a glass of red wine, looking like a man who thought he had already won the lottery. "Imani, sweetheart." My mother bustled out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "I made all your favorites. Sit down. Let us just be a family tonight. No phones, no arguments, just us." I sat down. I did not take off my blazer. I did not smile. I placed my heavy leather bag on the floor next to my chair, making sure it was within easy reach. The dinner was a masterclass in gaslighting. For 20 minutes they talked about the weather. They talked about the neighbors. They talked about everything except the fact that they were suing me for $2 million and publicly accusing me of being a corporate terrorist. I watched them eat. I watched Hunter shovel food into his mouth without a care in the world. I watched my father pretend that his empire was not crumbling. Finally, as my mother cleared the plates and brought out a peach cobbler, my father cleared his throat. It was the signal. The show was starting. "Imani." My father began clasping his hands on the table. "We have been doing a lot of thinking. This feud, this lawsuit, it is ugly. It is tearing this family apart. And frankly, it is beneath us." He reached under his chair and pulled out a crisp blue folder. He slid it across the polished wood table until it rested in front of me. "We want to offer you a path to redemption," he said softly. "We are willing to drop the lawsuit. We are willing to issue a public statement saying that the data loss was a technical glitch, not sabotage. We will restore your reputation." I looked at the folder. "And in exchange," I asked. Hunter leaned forward, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "In exchange," Hunter said, "you sign that document. It transfers your general contractor license back to the company effective immediately. You agree to come back as a consultant to oversee the completion of the heights, and because we are generous, we are prepared to offer you 5% equity in Davis Custom Homes." He sat back looking satisfied. 5%, Imani. That is a generous offer for someone who tried to destroy us. "You will be a partner. A minority partner, sure, but a partner." My mother reached out and touched my hand. "Take it, baby. Come home. Stop this foolishness with Mrs. Gable and come back where you belong." I looked at them. I looked at the family that had raised me, the people who were supposed to protect me. They truly believed I was desperate. They truly believed that 5% of their approval was worth more than 100% of my dignity. Hunter chuckled. Come on, kiddo. Last chance. Sign the paper, or we see you in court on Monday, and I promise you my lawyers will not leave you with enough money to buy a sandwich. I picked up the blue folder. I felt the weight of it. Then very slowly I slid it back across the table. No, I said. The room went dead silent. Hunter's smile faltered. Excuse me, my father said, his voice dropping an octave. Did you just say no to 5% of my company? I reached down into my bag. I did not pull out a pen. I pulled out a stack of papers still warm from the printer in the server room. I am not interested in 5% of your company, Dad, I said, my voice steady and calm. Because 5% of zero is zero. I tossed the first stack of photos onto the table. They fanned out, revealing the clear, high-resolution images of the flatbed trucks leaving the construction site. What is this? Bianca asked, picking up a photo. That, I said, pointing at Hunter, is your chief operating officer selling 40 tons of structural steel to a scrapyard for pennies on the dollar. Hunter turned white. That is out of context. We were clearing old material. I tossed the bank statements next. They landed right on top of his peach cobbler. And this, I said, is the wire transfer of $45,000 into your personal account. And here is the transfer to a crypto wallet. You are stealing from the company, Hunter. You are stripping the copper out of the walls before the house is even built. My father snatched up the papers. His hands were shaking as he read the transaction logs. He looked at Hunter, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. Hunter, is this true? My father whispered. It is fake, Hunter yelled, standing up. She forged them. She is a hacker, remember? She made this up. Sit down, Hunter, I commanded. I am not done. I turned to my father. I looked him in the eye. This was the hardest part. This was the moment that would break the last thread connecting us. You want to talk about theft, Dad? I said softly. Let us talk about the Employee Provident Fund. My father went still. He stopped breathing. I placed the final document on the table. It was the withdrawal slip for $180,000. You raided the pension fund, Dad. You took the retirement money of men like Mr. Henderson, men who have worked for you for 30 years, and you used it to buy a Porsche for a daughter who does not even know how to park it. Bianca gasped. She looked at her father. Daddy, you told me that was a bonus from the profits. There are no profits, Bianca, I said, looking at her with pity. The company is insolvent. Hunter has been cooking the books for 6 months to hide his gambling losses, and Dad has been raiding the reserves to keep up appearances. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. You offered me a path to redemption, I said, looking down at them. But you are the ones who need redeeming. You wanted me to sign my license over. If I did that, I would be an accessory to fraud. I would be going to prison with you. My mother was crying now, real tears this time. Imani, please, we can fix this. We can put the money back. Do not destroy us. I am not destroying you, Mother, I said. You destroyed yourselves when you decided that appearances mattered more than integrity. You destroyed us when you chose a thief over a builder because he wore a suit and I wore boots. I picked up my bag. Hunter, I said, looking at the man who was now slumped in his chair, staring at the table. My lawyer has already sent copies of these documents to the district attorney and the IRS. You might want to enjoy that wine. It is probably the last vintage bottle you will drink for about 10 years. I walked to the door. Wait, my father shouted. Imani, we can give you more. 10%, 20%. Take the company. Just stop the investigation. I paused at the doorway. I looked back at the dining room. It looked like a crime scene. The food was cold, the lies were exposed, the family was broken. 5%, 20%, or 100%, I said. It does not matter, Dad. I do not want a seat on a sinking ship. I have my own boat now, and it is sailing just fine. I walked out the front door and into the cool night air. Behind me, I heard the sound of glass breaking. I did not know if it was a wine glass or a mirror, and I did not care. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I did not look back. I had one more stop to make. A stop that would secure my future and seal their fate. The drive away from my parents' estate felt different than the night I left the party 2 weeks ago. That night I had fled in anger, my heart racing with the fear of the unknown. Tonight I drove with the windows down, letting the cool Atlanta air fill the car, my pulse steady and slow. I had laid the cards on the table. I had given them a choice. I told them that if they dropped the lawsuit and left me alone, I would not personally walk the evidence to the police station the next morning. It was a mercy they did not deserve, but it was the last shred of daughterly instinct left in me. I just wanted to be free of them. But I knew something they did not. I knew that in the world of high-stakes construction, silence is not golden. It is fatal. While my family was busy rearranging deck chairs on their sinking Titanic, the iceberg had already torn through the hull. I did not need to call the police because the inevitable laws of economics were about to do the dirty work for me. The first domino fell at 9 a.m. the next morning. I was in a site meeting with Mrs. Gable when my phone alerted me to a news update. It wasn't a police report. It was a financial filing. The bank that held the construction loan for the Heights had invoked the acceleration clause. Because the site had been red-tagged for 14 days, with no activity, the project was deemed in default. The bank was demanding immediate repayment of the entire $12 million principal. I could only imagine the panic inside the Davis Custom Homes office. My father, who prided himself on his credit score, would be staring at a letter that basically said, "Pay us $12 million by Friday, or we take everything." 2 hours later, the second domino fell, and this one made a much louder noise. Hunter had made a fatal miscalculation when he sold the stolen steel. He thought he was just dealing with a local scrapyard. He did not know that the scrapyard owner, Mr. Miller, was already under surveillance by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for a massive catalytic converter theft ring. When the police raided Miller's yard that morning, looking for stolen car parts, they found something else. They found 40 tons of high-grade structural steel with serial numbers stamped on them, serial numbers that were registered to Davis Custom Homes. I heard about it from Marcus, who was still in the group chat with the few terrified employees left at the office. "Imani, you need to turn on the news," Marcus texted. I walked to the break room where a TV was mounted on the wall. The news chopper was circling my father's office building. I watched in silence as 3 black SUVs pulled up to the front entrance. These were not city inspectors. These were agents from the Economic Crimes Unit. The camera zoomed in as they escorted a man out of the building. It was Hunter. He was not wearing his signature tailored suit jacket. He was in his shirt sleeves, his tie undone, looking smaller and paler than I had ever seen him. His hands were cuffed behind his back. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Construction executive arrested in connection with stolen materials ring." I took a sip of my coffee. I felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction. I had warned him. I had told him that trying to build a fortune on a foundation of theft would only lead to a collapse. He had chosen to gamble with steel, and now he was going to pay with iron bars. But the universe was not done with the Davis family yet. Karma, it seemed, was feeling particularly thorough today. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. It was not a hate comment this time. It was a tag from one of Bianca's so-called best friends, a girl named Tiffany, who lived for drama. I opened the app. It was a video recorded vertically shaky and raw. The location tag was the Sanctuary Spa in Buckhead, the most exclusive and expensive spa in the city. The video showed a tow truck backing up to the valet stand. A large, burly man in a neon vest was hooking chains onto the front axle of a white Porsche Cayenne. Then the camera panned to the spa entrance. Bianca came running out. She was wearing a fluffy white robe and slippers, her hair wrapped in a towel, a green clay mask still hardening on her face. Stop! Bianca screamed, her voice cracking. That is my car. You cannot take that. My husband is the COO of Davis Custom Homes. The tow truck driver did not even look at her. He just kept cranking the winch. Lady, the bank put a repo order on this vehicle 3 days ago, the driver shouted over the noise of the engine. Payment is 90 days overdue. No! Bianca shrieked, grabbing the door handle of the car as it began to lift off the ground. My daddy paid for this car. It is paid off. You are stealing it. The driver laughed. Honey, the check your daddy wrote bounced higher than this car is about to. Step away from the vehicle or I am calling the cops. The person recording the video snickered. Oh my God, Tiffany's voice whispered behind the camera. Bianca is literally getting repoed in her bathrobe. This is insane. I watched as my sister, the girl who had mocked my work boots, the girl who had called me dirty and low class, stood in the middle of the street in her slippers, green clay cracking on her face, screaming at a tow truck driver while her friends laughed at her. She looked around for support for someone to save her, but everyone was holding up their phones recording her downfall for content. The video ended with the Porsche disappearing down the street and Bianca collapsing onto the curb, sobbing into her hands. I closed the app. I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. It was the death of the image they had tried so hard to maintain. They had sacrificed their integrity, their employees, and their own daughter to maintain the illusion of wealth. And now, in the span of 6 hours, the illusion had been stripped away, leaving them naked and shivering in the harsh light of reality. My phone began to ring. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I knew exactly what was happening. She was standing in the wreckage of her life. Her husband was likely in shock, her son-in-law was in a holding cell, and her golden child was humiliated on the internet. She was calling the only person left who knew how to fix things. She was calling the fixer, the worker bee, the one she had thrown away. I let it ring. It stopped. Then it rang again immediately. And again. A voicemail notification popped up. I decided to listen to it just to be sure. Imani, please. My mother's voice was unrecognizable. It was broken, hysterical. They took Hunter. They took the car. The bank is calling about the house. Daddy cannot breathe. You have to help us. You have money now. Mrs. Gable will listen to you. Please, baby. We are family. You cannot let this happen to us. I deleted the voicemail. I did not let this happen to you, Mother, I said to the empty room. You let this happen when you decided that a thief in a suit was worth more than an honest woman in boots. I went into my phone settings. I scrolled down to the contact labeled Mom. I pressed block caller. Then I did the same for Dad. And Bianca. I walked over to the window of my office. The sun was setting over Atlanta, casting long shadows across the skyline. Far below, the city was moving on. Traffic was flowing, buildings were rising, life was continuing. I was no longer the girl who waited for their approval. I was no longer the safety net they could fall into when they jumped off a cliff of their own making. I turned back to my desk. I had work to do. I had a legitimate crew to pay, a legitimate building to design, and a future to construct. The Davis Custom Homes empire had fallen not because of a virus, or a sabotage, or a vengeful daughter. It had fallen because it was built on sand, and I was finally standing on solid ground. The glass doors of the Davis Custom Homes headquarters had always seemed massive to me when I was a child. I used to think they were the gateway to a kingdom heavy and impenetrable, guarding the secrets of the men who built the city. But as I walked through them on that humid Tuesday morning, the air conditioning hitting my face with a blast of artificial chill, they just looked like glass. Dirty glass at that. The cleaning crew had stopped coming 3 days ago when the checks started bouncing, and fingerprints already smeared the handles. The lobby was stripped bare. The leather sofas where clients used to wait were tagged with lot numbers. The architectural models of our greatest hits, the skyscrapers, and the luxury condos sat on tables like toys at a yard sale. It smelled of stale coffee and desperation. I was not alone. Mrs. Gable walked beside me, her heels clicking a steady rhythmic beat on the marble floor. She wore a black suit that cost more than my first year's salary, and she carried a calmness that sucked the oxygen out of the room. We did not speak. We did not need to. We were not here to negotiate. We were here to collect. We entered the main conference room. This was the room where my father had announced Bianca as CEO. This was the room where I had been told to sit in the back and take notes. Now rows of folding chairs faced a podium where a bored-looking auctioneer was sorting through papers. In the back corner, huddled together like rats on a sinking raft, were my father and Hunter. They looked terrible. My father Isaiah had aged 10 years and 10 days. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his eyes bloodshot. Hunter looked even worse. He was twitching, his eyes darting around the room, sweat beading on his upper lip despite the cold air. I moved closer, staying just out of their line of sight behind a pillar. I wanted to hear them. I wanted to witness the absolute bottom. Hunter was whispering frantically into a burner phone. "Please, Vinny, I just need a bridge loan. 48 hours. I have the equity. The building alone is worth 10 million. I will sign it over to you as collateral. Just give me the cash to stop the auction." I listened to the silence on the other end, followed by Hunter's voice rising in panic. "What do you mean too hot? The feds are not looking at the real estate assets. Vinny, listen to me. If you do not help me, I am dead." He pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at it as the call ended. He looked at my father. He said no. Hunter whispered, his voice cracking. "Even the street lenders won't touch us, Isaiah. They know the FBI is freezing accounts. They think we are radioactive." My father put his head in his hands. "It is over," he moaned. "The legacy. My father's name. It is all gone." Hunter grabbed his arm. "No, we can still stall them. We can cause a scene, claim a medical emergency. Anything to stop the gavel." I stepped out from behind the pillar. "You can try, Hunter," I said, my voice carrying across the empty room. "But I think the marshals standing at the door might have an issue with that." They both spun around. The look on their faces was a masterpiece of horror and confusion. They saw me. Then they saw Mrs. Gable standing next to me. "Imani," my father breathed. "What are you doing here?" "I am here to shop, Dad," I said, smoothing my blazer. "I heard there was a fire sale. Everything must go right." Hunter stood up, his face flushing red. "You cannot be here. This is a private liquidation. Get out." The auctioneer cleared his throat, tapping his microphone. "Actually," the auctioneer said, looking at his list, "this is a public auction mandated by the bankruptcy court. Ms. Davis and Mrs. Gable are registered bidders. Unless you have a cashier's check for the outstanding debt of $12 million, please sit down and be quiet." Hunter slumped back into his chair. He looked at me with pure hatred, but underneath the hate was fear. He knew I knew where the bodies were buried. The auction began. It was brutal and fast. Lot number 1, the auctioneer droned. "The commercial office building located at 450 Peachtree Street. Includes all fixtures, furniture, and intellectual property associated with the brand Davis Custom Homes. Opening bid is $2 million. The room was silent. There were a few other investors there, vultures looking for scraps, but they all knew the baggage that came with this building. They knew about the investigations. They knew about the stolen steel. Nobody wanted to touch it. $2 million, the auctioneer repeated. "Do I have $2 million? Hunter raised his hand. $2 million, he shouted. The auctioneer looked at him over his glasses. "Sir, do you have proof of funds verified by the court trustee?" I have a verbal commitment," Hunter stammered. "The funds are in transit." "Then you do not have a bid," the auctioneer said coldly. "Sit down, or I will have you removed." Hunter collapsed. It was the final humiliation. He could not even buy back his own failure. I looked at Mrs. Gable. She nodded. I raised my paddle. It was number 001. $4 million, I said. The room turned to look at me. My father's mouth fell open. $4 million was a steal for the building, but it was an impossible amount of money for the Imani he thought he knew. He did not know about the signing bonus Mrs. Gable had given me. He did not know about the investors who had backed my new venture because they trusted my reputation, not his. "I have 4 million from bidder number 001, the auctioneer said. "Do I hear 4.5? Silence. 4.5 anyone. I looked at my father. I watched the realization wash over him. He wasn't losing his company to a bank. He wasn't losing it to a stranger. He was losing it to the daughter he had called a worker bee. He was losing it to the hands he said were not smart enough to hold a pen. "Going once," the auctioneer chanted. I saw Hunter close his eyes. He knew that the moment that gavel fell, his immunity was gone. The building was his shield. Without it, he was just a thief with a lot of debt. Going twice. I kept my eyes on my father. I wanted him to remember this moment. I wanted him to remember that he had a choice. He could have passed the torch to me with pride. Instead, I had to snatch it from the ashes. "Sold," the auctioneer yelled, slamming the gavel down. "To bidder number 001 for $4 million. The sound of the wood hitting the podium echoed like a gunshot. It was done. I walked up to the front table to sign the papers. My hand did not shake. I signed my name in blue ink. Imani Davis, owner. When I turned around, Hunter was gone. He had slipped out the back door, probably trying to run, before the police arrived to question him about the latest findings in the audit. But my father was still sitting there. He looked small. He looked like an old man waiting for a bus that had already left. I walked over to him. "Imani," he whispered. "You bought it. You saved it." I stopped. I looked down at him. "I did not save it, Dad," I said. "I bought the corpse. Davis Custom Homes is dead. I am just buying the building to house my new company." He looked confused. "Your new company? What are you going to call it?" I smiled. A cold, sharp smile. "I am calling it the Foundation," I said. "Because that is the only part of this building that was ever worth a damn, and it is the only part I built." I turned my back on him and walked toward the glass doors. Mrs. Gable was waiting for me. "We have work to do, Evelyn," I said. "I want that sign taken down off the building by tomorrow morning." "Consider it done," she said. As we walked out into the bright Atlanta sunshine, I felt the heavy weight of the last 7 years lift off my shoulders. I had walked into that building as a servant. I walked out as the master. The war was over. I had won. But the cleanup was just beginning, and I had one final piece of trash to take out before I could truly start fresh. The heavy silence that followed the fall of the gavel was shattered by a scream that sounded more animal than human. Hunter had stopped running toward the back exit. He had realized that the doors were blocked by security, and in his twisted, desperate mind, he decided that there was only one person to blame for the destruction of his life. He spun around, his face purple with rage, veins bulging in his neck like cords. He did not look like the polished executive anymore. He looked like a cornered rat baring its teeth. "You planned this," he roared, his voice echoing off the empty walls of the conference room. "You planned this from the very beginning. You set me up. You planted the evidence. You stole my company." He charged down the center aisle, knocking over folding chairs as he ran. His eyes were fixed on me with murderous intent. My father let out a strangled cry of warning, but he was too old and too shocked to move. Mrs. Gable flinched, stepping in front of me instinctively, but I gently moved her aside. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood perfectly still, watching him come closer, because I knew something he did not. I knew that the two men in dark suits standing by the emergency exit were not just building security. Hunter lunged at me, his hands reaching for my throat. But before he could get within 5 feet, he was tackled from the side with the force of a freight train. The two officers hit him simultaneously, driving him into the carpet with a thud that shook the floor. Hunter screamed as his arm was twisted behind his back. "Get off me! Do you know who I am? I am the COO of this company." "Not anymore," a deep voice said. A third officer walked up to the pile of limbs. He was wearing a badge that identified him as a detective with the Economic Crimes Unit. He looked down at Hunter, who was thrashing and spitting on the floor. Hunter Vance, the detective, said, his voice calm and practiced. You are under arrest for 18 counts of wire fraud, grand larceny, embezzlement of pension funds, and tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The handcuffs clicked shut. That metallic sound was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It was the sound of closure. Hunter was hauled to his feet. His expensive suit was covered in lint and dust from the carpet. His hair was wild. He looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. Imani, tell them, he begged, switching instantly from aggression to pathetic pleading. Tell them it was a mistake. We are family. You cannot let them take me. I will give you the passwords. I will give you everything. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me a draft horse. The man who had sold the safety of my crew for cryptocurrency. I already have the passwords. Hunter, I said quietly, and I gave them to the detective this morning along with the deed to the building. You do not have anything to offer me anymore, not even an apology. Take him away, the detective ordered. As they dragged him out, Hunter began to weep. It was a loud, ugly sound. He screamed for Bianca, but Bianca was nowhere to be found. She was hiding in the bathroom, too terrified to witness the consequences of the lifestyle she had demanded. When the double doors swung shut behind him, the room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. It was just me, Mrs. Gable, my father, and my mother, who had arrived just in time to see her son-in-law being stuffed into a police car through the glass walls of the lobby. My mother walked over to my father. She was trembling. She looked at me, then at Mrs. Gable, then at the empty podium where the auctioneer was packing up his bag. He is gone, she whispered. Hunter is gone. He is going to prison, Mother, I said, for a very long time. My father looked up at me. He looked stripped of everything. His pride, his legacy, his heir. You bought the building, he said, his voice raspy. So Davis Custom Homes survives. It stays in the family. We can rebuild Imani. You, me, and Bianca. We can make it right. I shook my head slowly. I walked over to the large window that overlooked the front entrance of the building. Outside, a cherry-picker crane was already raised to the level of the second floor. 2 workers were up in the basket wielding power drills. Come here, I said. Look. My parents walked slowly to the window. They watched as the workers began to unscrew the massive steel letters that had hung on the building for 20 years. D. A. V. What are you doing? My father gasped. That is my name. That is my legacy. It was your legacy, Dad, I said. But you sold it. You sold it piece by piece every time you let Hunter cut a corner. You sold it when you took the pension money. You sold it when you chose a title over talent. The letter I came loose and swung precariously on a chain before being lowered to the ground. That name has come to mean fraud, I continued. It means unsafe working conditions. It means bouncing checks. No bank in this city will touch the name Davis Custom Homes. It is toxic. Then what are we going to do? My mother cried. How will we live? The accounts are frozen. I turned away from the window to face them. You are going to retire, I said. You are going to go to the lake house, which is the only asset I allowed you to keep in the settlement I negotiated with the bank this morning. You are going to live on your Social Security, and you are going to stay out of the construction business forever. The door to the conference room creaked open. Bianca stood there. She had clearly been crying. Her mascara was running down her face. She had lost her shoes and was standing in her stocking feet. She looked at the empty room, then at me. Is he gone? She whispered. Yes, I said. She let out a sob and ran toward our parents, collapsing into my mother's arms. Imani Bianca wept, burying her face in my mother's shoulder. I did not know. I swear I did not know he was stealing. He told me the money was ours. He told me I deserved the car. You knew enough, Bianca, I said. You knew he was firing good men. You knew he was mocking me. You enjoyed the fruit of the poisonous tree, and now you are choking on it. She pulled away from Mom and looked at me. Her eyes were red and swollen. I am sorry, she choked out. I am so sorry, Amani. I was awful to you. I was jealous. I know I am not a CEO. I know I am not smart like you. Please, help me. I have nothing. They took my car. They are going to take my house. I do not have a job. I looked at my sister. The golden child. The queen. Now she was just a frightened woman who had never learned how to tie her own shoelaces because everyone else had always done it for her. I felt a flicker of pity, but I stomped it out. Pity was what got us here. Pity was what made me stay for 7 years while they drained me dry. I walked over to the table where the auction documents sat. I picked up the folder containing the incorporation papers for my new company. I am not going to give you money, Bianca, I said. And I am not going to give you a job you are not qualified for. There will be no VP title, no corner office. Then what? She sniffed. I pointed out the window where the last letter of our father's name was hitting the pavement. From tomorrow morning, this building will house the headquarters of ID Construction, I announced. ID, my father repeated. Imani Davis. Yes, I said. But it also stands for identity, because for the first time this company will have one. An identity built on integrity, on hard work, on paying people what they are worth. I looked at Bianca. We need a receptionist, I said. The pay is $15 an hour. You answer phones. You greet guests. You make coffee. And you wear a uniform. A uniform, Bianca recoiled. Yes, a polo shirt with the new logo. And comfortable shoes. Because you will be on your feet all day. She looked at Mom. She looked at Dad. They said nothing. They had no power to save her anymore. Take it or leave it, I said, checking my watch. I have a meeting with my architect in 10 minutes to discuss the remodel. I need to know if I need to post a help wanted ad. Bianca looked down at her stocking feet. She looked at the luxury life that had evaporated into thin air. She took a deep, shuddering breath. I will take it, she whispered. Good, I said. Be here at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Do not be late. And Bianca. She looked up. If you are rude to a single employee, if you look down on anyone because their boots are dirty, you are fired. Do you understand? Yes, she said softly. I understand. I nodded. I turned to Mrs. Gable, who had been watching the entire scene with a small, satisfied smile. Shall we? I asked. We walked out of the conference room, leaving my family standing in the ruins of their ego. As we crossed the lobby, I saw the workers bringing in the new sign. It was sleek, modern, and strong. ID Construction. I stopped for a moment to touch the cool metal of the letter I. It felt solid. It felt real. I had lost a family that never truly saw me, but I had found myself. And looking at the future stretching out before me, I knew it was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. The draft horse had finally broken the cart, and now she was running free. The sun rose over Atlanta the next morning with a clarity that felt almost blinding. For the first time in 30 years, the parking lot of the building at 450 Peachtree Street did not have a reserved spot for Isaiah Davis or Hunter Vance. Instead, the prime spot right next to the front door was occupied by my battered Ford F-150. I had bought the building, I had bought the company, and I could have easily bought a new luxury car to celebrate. But I kept the truck. I kept it as a reminder of who I was and where I came from. It was a message to every employee who walked past it. The boss drives a work truck, so you better be ready to work. Inside the glass-walled conference room, the air was thick with the smell of fresh paint and humility. My parents sat on the other side of the desk. My father, who used to sit in the high-back leather chair I now occupied, looked uncomfortable in the guest seat. My mother kept smoothing her skirt, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected the police to burst in again. "Here is the deal," I said, sliding a thick envelope across the mahogany surface. My father reached for it, his hands trembling slightly. "What is this?" he asked. "It is a lease agreement," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I bought the mortgage note on your house from the bank this morning. They were about to foreclose, Dad. They were going to put you on the street." I stopped them. My mother let out a sob of relief. "Oh, thank God. Thank you, Imani. I knew you would not let us lose our home." I held up a hand. "Read the fine print." "Mother, you get to keep the house. You have a roof over your heads for the rest of your lives. But that is where my charity ends." I pointed to the second document in the pile. "I am not paying for the country club membership. I am not paying for the landscaping crew. I am not paying for the housekeeper. And I am certainly not paying for the leasing on the Mercedes." My father looked up, his face pale. "But Imani, the maintenance on that house alone is $3,000 a month. We only have our Social Security." "Then I suggest you learn how to mow your own lawn, Dad," I said. "You have plenty of free time now. And Mom, I hear the vacuum cleaner works just fine if you push it yourself." They stared at me. They were waiting for me to crack. They were waiting for the daughter who used to desperate for their approval to hand them a blank check. But that daughter was gone. She had been fired by a family who valued greed over loyalty. "It is a fair deal," I said, standing up. "You keep your dignity. You keep your home. But the days of living like royalty on money you did not earn are over. Sign it, or I let the bank take the keys by 5 p.m. today." They signed. They signed with shaky hands and defeated eyes. They walked out of my office not as titans of industry, but as two elderly pensioners who had just been given a very expensive lesson in gratitude. As the elevator doors closed on my parents, the service door to the lobby opened. Bianca walked in. She stopped in the doorway. She was wearing the uniform I had ordered for the front desk staff. It was a navy blue polo shirt with the ID Construction logo embroidered in white, paired with sensible khaki trousers and black sneakers. On anyone else it would have looked professional. On Bianca, who had spent her entire adult life in silk and cashmere, it looked like a prison jumpsuit. She tugged at the collar, looking miserable. The fabric was stiff. It did not breathe like the designer fabrics she was used to. "I am here," she whispered, not looking me in the eye. "You are late," I said, checking my watch. "It is 8:05. The shift starts at 8 o'clock. There was traffic," she started to argue, the old entitlement flaring up. "I do not care," I cut her off. "If you are late again, I dock your pay. If you are late a third time, you are fired. Do we understand each other?" She swallowed hard. "Yes, I understand." "Good," I said. "Your station is the front desk. The phones will start ringing in 10 minutes. But first, the coffee station in the waiting area needs to be restocked." Bianca looked at the coffee machine. It was an industrial brewer, not the fancy espresso maker she had in her kitchen. I do not know how to work it," she admitted. "Figure it out," I said, turning back to my computer. The first test came 20 minutes later. The front door opened, and in walked Marcus, my lead foreman. He was wearing his dusty work boots and his neon safety vest. He was covered in drywall dust from the morning shift. He stopped at the front desk, looking surprised to see the former CEO standing there holding a pot of coffee. Bianca froze. She looked at Marcus. She looked at the dirt on his clothes. I watched from my office, the glass door slightly ajar. I held my breath. This was the moment. If she sneered, if she rolled her eyes, if she made a single comment about the smell of sweat, she was gone. Marcus leaned against the counter. He knew exactly what was happening. He had been there when she fired Mr. Henderson. He smiled a slow, knowing smile. "Morning, Bianca," Marcus said. "I will take a black coffee, 2 sugars, and make sure it is hot." Bianca gripped the coffee pot. Her knuckles turned white. I could see the war raging inside her. The part of her that believed she was a queen was screaming to throw the hot liquid in his face. But the part of her that was broke, the part of her that had watched her Porsche get towed, knew she had no choice. She took a deep breath. She picked up a paper cup. She poured the coffee. She added 2 sugars. She stirred it. "Here you go, Marcus," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was steady. Marcus took the cup. He took a sip. He nodded. "Not bad," he said. "See you tomorrow, Bianca." He walked toward the elevators, winking at me as he passed my office. Bianca stood there clutching the empty pot. She had survived. She had served the people she used to rule, and the world had not ended. I walked out to the reception desk. I placed a headset on the counter. "The lines are lighting up," I said. "Pick it up. Say thank you for calling ID Construction. How may I help you build your future?" Bianca put the headset on. She adjusted the microphone. A light blinked on the console. "Thank you for calling ID Construction," she said, her voice trembling just a little. "How may I help you?" I watched her for a moment longer. She looked small. She looked ordinary. She looked like a woman who was finally earning her keep. I turned around and walked back to my office. I had a meeting with Mrs. Gable about the skyline, and I did not have time to babysit. The hierarchy had been reset. The queen was dead. Long live the worker. 3 months later, the view from my office window was very different. The cranes at the heights were moving again, swinging back and forth in a rhythmic dance of progress. The red stop work tags were gone, replaced by green permits that bore my signature. The concrete that had trapped Bianca's shoe was long gone, covered by the sleek foundation of a building that was actually going to stand the test of time. My phone rang on my desk. I glanced at the caller ID. It was a collect call from the Fulton County Correctional Facility. It was Hunter. He had been calling every week since his sentencing, 10 years. The judge had not been lenient. The evidence of the pension theft had been the final nail in his coffin. He called to beg. He called to blame. He called to ask if I could put money in his commissary account because he didn't like the prison food. I looked at the phone. I let it ring. I did not feel anger anymore. I did not feel the need to pick up and gloat. He was a ghost to me, a memory of a mistake I would never make again. I pressed the ignore button. I stood up and grabbed my hard hat. It wasn't a new shiny white one like the executives wore. It was my old yellow one, scratched and dented with stickers from every job I had ever worked. I walked out of the office past the front desk where Bianca was typing furiously, answering 3 calls at once. She didn't look up. She was too busy working. I drove the F-150 to the new site. Mrs. Gable was waiting for me. We were breaking ground on the library renovation today. I stepped out of the truck. The smell of wet earth and diesel fuel filled the air. It was the best smell in the world. The crew was already there. 50 men and women strapping on their tool belts, checking their levels, ready to build. They stopped when they saw me. They didn't stop out of fear. They stopped out of respect. Imani, Mr. Henderson, called out. He had come out of retirement to run this one last job with me. "We are ready for the pour." I walked over to the edge of the foundation pit. I looked down at the rebar mesh, the steel skeleton that would hold up the weight of thousands of books, of thousands of stories. I looked at my hands. They were not soft. They were not manicured. They had a small cut on the thumb from a tape measure this morning. They were rough. They were strong. My mother had told me these hands were shameful. My father had told me they were only good for digging. My brother-in-law had told me they were meant to serve him. They were all wrong. These hands were not shameful. These hands were the most valuable tools I owned. These hands had dug through the lies. These hands had dismantled a corrupt empire brick by brick, and now these hands were building a legacy that no one could take away from me because I wasn't inheriting it. I was earning it. I looked up at the camera, breaking the fourth wall, speaking to every person who has ever been told they were too dirty, too loud, or too rough to sit at the table. They told me I was the help. They told me to stay in the back. They thought that because I wore boots, I couldn't run the boardroom. But they forgot that every castle, every skyscraper, every monument to human achievement starts in the dirt. You cannot build a future if you are afraid to get your hands dirty. I put my hard hat on. I tightened the strap. So let them talk. Let them judge. Let them sit in their ivory towers and look down on us. Because while they are talking, we are building. And when the storm comes, and it always comes, their towers will fall, but ours will stand. I turned to Mr. Henderson. I nodded. Let's build, I said. Mr. Henderson blew the whistle. The concrete mixers roared to life. The sound was deafening. It sounded like thunder. It sounded like victory. I walked into the site, my boots sinking into the mud, ready to work. The heiress had left the building. The builder had arrived. The most powerful lesson from Imani's journey is that your true worth is never defined by someone else's inability to see it, even if that person is your own family. While the Davis family built their legacy on the fragile foundation of appearances and ego, Imani built hers on the solid bedrock of integrity and hard work. True power doesn't come from a title you are handed. It comes from the competence you earn with your own two hands. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from a table where you are undervalued to build your own empire from the ground up. If you have ever had to succeed in spite of those who underestimated you, hit that like button and share your victory in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience.